Members, we'll resume with questions to the Deputy First Minister and call Andy Allen. Mr. Allen, or Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all want to see a truly transformative programme for government which sets a clear strategic direction for the Executive and which enables the type of cross-departmental collaboration and working needed to improve public services and tackle long-standing social, economic and environmental concerns. To achieve this, we are committed to working in partnership across the Executive to deliver an ambitious programme which responds to the challenges we collectively face. We have started to address these challenges already by moving quickly to tackle public sector pay, to start the work needed to make childcare affordable, and by seeking to work urgently with the Treasury to put in place a more sustainable financial settlement. While we have not put a specific timetable around this yet, we know that the Assembly would like to see progress quickly. That is shared by the Executive. It is, however, important that the Executive develops a programme for government at a sensible pace and takes into account all of the relevant issues, and that our collective priorities are considered alongside an incredibly challenging financial and operational backdrop.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deputy First Minister, there is no doubt that over 46,000 people on social housing waiting lists will want to see a transformative and ambitious programme for government. To that end, will you commit to pressing for a standalone housing outcome within that PFG?
Okay, thank you. The process is ongoing. We expect proposals to be brought up to the First Minister and myself very shortly, but of course there is that inbuilt consultation process, not just with this Assembly, which is the legislative requirement, but also we want to get out there and listen to the issues across various groups and on the ground. But you're absolutely right, we only have to look to our closest neighbours to see the housing crisis that they are currently in, not just in terms of homelessness and on social housing, but in terms of access to affordable housing for families right throughout those places. So we're very conscious of that, and I think in order to prevent that, work needs to commence now. So that is something we've already discussed, but yes, that will be fully taken into account in terms of the PFG process.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with Andy Allen in terms of standalone housing. But could I also ask the Deputy First Minister, in terms of, we all look forward to the programme for government, but perhaps you could give us more details on how the outcomes of the PFG will be measured?
Yes, the member will be aware that a significant amount of work and consultation went into the previous draft programme for government. That included consultation on a well-being framework and an outcomes-based framework. This is very much the direction in which public policy is moving towards, and it really is to encourage people to look at that cross-departmental collaborative actions, but that those actions should be focused on the outcome. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? And of course, key to that is the measurement of progress against those outcomes. So we do have a wellbeing framework that is live at the moment across all Section 75 groups and monitoring. But of course, we will be focused on ensuring the right matrix for an outcomes-based approach to the programme for government.
Thank you, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers so far. The Deputy First Minister will be acutely aware that I am very keen to see the economy in the West boosted. Can the Minister confirm, will the programme for government contain any specific economic targets and which sectors are key to Northern Ireland's growth?
Yes, absolutely. And as indicated already in a number of the public remarks that both the First Minister and myself have made, we are very keen that we have a strong prosperity agenda for Northern Ireland. But that must mean for all of Northern Ireland, that must mean for every part of Northern Ireland. And we're very conscious that that will be fully integrated in terms of our economic approach, which will be a key mission within the programme for government. And you're absolutely right, that must be backed up by the right indicators. Of course, we encourage investment in Northern Ireland, no matter where that investment is coming from. And of course, we will listen to those companies willing to invest about where they want to go. But we have this incredible story to tell in terms of so many of our places throughout Northern Ireland, and we will ensure that in speaking to businesses that we will make clear the huge benefits of many, many places right throughout Northern Ireland.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer so far. I'm just going to pick up on the previous debate there around the deterioration of our public services over the last number of years in terms of stop-start politics. And I'm just wondering, in terms of your leadership role and that of the First Minister, how are you going to work through areas of government where we need to stabilise and where we need to transform in the programme for government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been huge challenges in relation to this. I think it's notable that in quite a number of years, really since 2015, 2016, we have been operating on a single-year budget instead of a multi-year budget. Now, again, that is a product not necessarily of our system, but of the spending review aspects from London, and we are dependent on what is happening with that. And again, we'll find ourselves in a single-year budget this year because this is the final year of the spending review period. But we would want to move absolutely onto a multi-year budget that should be aligned with an ambitious programme for government, as I have set out. But of course, what we also need is the ability to make that investment in public service transformation while we continue to provide public services. And that has always been a huge challenge, because if the choice is to take away from frontline public service delivery right now in order to do that medium to long-term planning, that has been a very difficult decision and choice for ministers, and understandably. So we have made clear to the UK Government that we want to put our finances on a sustainable basis which facilitates both of those key themes of work: delivering good public services right now to the people who need them, but being able to absolutely invest in the transformation work that we need to make our public services fit for purpose.
Question 2 is withdrawn. Call John Stewart.
The role of our offices in Washington DC, Brussels and Beijing is to represent and promote the Executive's interests and priorities overseas. As a small, outward-looking economy, this is key to our ambitions to build a more prosperous region where our businesses and our citizens can realise their potential. The Bureau worked closely with key partners including Invest NI, Tourism Ireland, local government and the business community in promoting Northern Ireland as a great place to work, live, invest and visit. We have come to enjoy unprecedented access to the key decision makers at the most senior levels, right at the heart of the world's largest economies. That is welcome. We need to build on this if we are to realise our ambitions. As we look forward, we need to have a clear focus on both our priorities for our overseas offices, but also on new opportunities and regions.
Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer, and also congratulate her and wish her all the best going forward. As you say, there's a great deal of goodwill to Northern Ireland right now, particularly around the world, in light of the Executive coming back, and we have a very skilled and highly able workforce. Is there any more that we can do to promote Northern Ireland in the world stage, given our economic mobility here and the unique circumstances that we have, and what plans do you have to maybe extend the offering of the Northern Ireland Bureau around the world?
Deputy First Minister.
Absolutely, and we've always been very conscious in terms of our offices overseas that we don't work in isolation, we don't work in silo in terms of just the Executive Office, but we work very closely with, example, Invest NI to identify those opportunities and priorities. Northern Ireland's economy will only grow through that investment, that foreign direct investment, that support, that collaboration. We're very conscious of that. Very often our size can be a challenge in terms of economies of scale and cost, but it's also an incredible opportunity, because we should be able to get ourselves into a position of being very agile in terms of identifying new and emerging opportunities. We've made significant progress on that, for example, on fintech, regtech and our creative industries. That is the type of thing that we need to build on, absolutely, to promote ourselves as a key region connected between government, business and our universities to really sell the opportunities of Northern Ireland as a great place for international investment and growth.
Nicola Brogan.
Agus British leis and Ira Fosta. As the Deputy First Minister has outlined, the work of the Bureau is extremely important in increasing trade, investment, tourist opportunities and employment. Can I ask the Deputy First Minister for an assessment of the Bureau's delivery over the last 12 months as a whole?
Deputy First Minister.
Yes, the work of the Bureau has continued over the last 12 months, but of course we're very conscious that there was a strategy that was put in place that was back in 2014. There were some attempts over the subsequent years in terms of revising that, but a decision was made to look at this in a longer term strategic framework for not just the Executive Office but for the Executive and all of the key interests. We are expecting to have proposals put up to the First Minister and myself from officials around how we will approach that new strategy. But again, we want to collectively work with everyone across this House to make sure that our strategy for international engagement is fit for purpose, and that will include an assessment of the work of all of the 3 overseas offices over the course of the last 12 months to identify what has been effective and what we need to build on.
Thank
you. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister will be in Washington DC next week for St Patrick's. Can I ask what benefits that they aim to deliver for Northern Ireland and bring forward during that trip?
Minister.
Yes, our annual visit to DC around St Patrick's Day offers unprecedented access to key decision makers at a very senior level. I think when you look across the globe of the opportunities that equivalent regions or countries the size of Northern Ireland get, we do have this incredible access, and we want to maximise the opportunity with that. We will be going to DC with a very positive message. It's the positive message that we have sought out to really establish over the course of the first 4 weeks of our joint leadership of the Executive, and that is that Northern Ireland is up for investment. We are up for that growth. We want Northern Ireland to thrive for all of our young people, all of our places right throughout, and we will be going to DC. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think there's a huge amount of goodwill out there, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure we maximise that opportunity of goodwill to bring the maximum benefit to everyone here in Northern Ireland.
Speaker, Deputy First Minister, do you agree that stop-start government damages our international reputation and negates our ability to positively sell Northern Ireland? And remember, it's only 12 months since we didn't go to Washington last year because we had no government.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you. As I've set out very, very clearly, the key thing in terms of moving forward is to try to build those robust, those confident, those strong and constructive working relationships. I look forward to working with the member and her party as official opposition, but indeed with parties right throughout this Assembly in order to sell that very positive vision. The key thing here is to ensure that we avoid instability by working well together, and I am confident at this stage that we have the ambition to do that right across the Executive and all of the parties of the Executive, and I look forward to working constructively with the official opposition as well.
Question number 4.
First Minister.
Global challenges impact us locally. Engagement with international partners is vital in delivering for all people here. We have seen significant changes in the last 10 years since the first international relations strategy was published, and we are considering how a future strategy will deliver the Executive's priorities. Part of that will be building deeper relationships with the key international regions that can help us, whether we build trade and investment links or to learn from others and share our experiences. We have seen a considerable increase in delegations coming here in the last year, and we will build on those links to develop new relationships. Improving our relationship with the EU, its institution and member states is indeed an important focus. We will also work closely with our UK government and the Irish government in terms of their representations overseas to boost opportunities.
Mr. Irwin.
Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for her response, and can I wish her very well in her new post, given that she was born and bred in my constituency and has close ties. Me and family still remain in Northern. Does the Deputy First Minister believe that the Bureau office locations are best located, and is there a need for a review of the roles that they do?
Yes, thank you. And of course, in terms of the strategy moving forward, an evaluation of the successes over the course of the last number of years will be invaluable. That will have to be fed into what we build on moving forward. We're very conscious that, of course, in the US we have our office in DC and in Brussels, which of course are the centres of key power. But of course we will continue to assess strategic advantages. This was part and parcel of the review in 2017 in terms of international relations strategy, to identify which regions there is potential in terms of growth, what regions is there potential of forging that closer relationship that will be to the benefit of our businesses and to Northern Ireland. So we keep that under active review, and that will be very much part of the new international relations strategy.
Ellie Armstrong.
Can I ask the Deputy First Minister, when she's thinking about the changes and the possible locations of the international offices, how will human rights be promoted in those areas? Because as well as trade, we're very aware as a liberal democracy that we need to promote that too.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In all of this engagement, it is done very clearly within the context of our strong position on human rights, including internationally.
Kearney.
Minister, you've referenced the review of the international relations strategy. There is still considerable scope for that strategy to be developed and built upon. Can you identify for us this afternoon what are the new global challenges that the Executive International Strategy must focus on, and advise what innovations you personally will bring to ensure that our international relations strategy going forward is capable of meeting those challenges and opportunities?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we are aware of the ever-changing global situation, and particularly in relation to geopolitics. We have the current war in terms of Ukraine and Russia. We have areas of instability, including in relation to key trade routes. But of course, there are also opportunities. The growth of the tech industries, some of which we've done very well on thus far, including cybersecurity and the likes of reg tech. There's huge potential for that, along with AI and other technologies and industries where we've already had a proven track record. So the key thing will be to be working closely with the Department of the Economy, with Invest NI, identifying which partners offer the best opportunity in terms of investment. We are relatively small. We cannot cover everywhere, of course we can't, and that's why that targeting in line with the Department of the Economy's 10X strategy will be absolutely key, focusing on a small number of strategic objectives that give us the best possible opportunity of achieving those to the benefit of Northern Ireland. The number of years covered by the Executive's budget is dependent on the period covered by the Treasury's spending review. As 2024-25 is the last year of the current spending review and the Executive's funding beyond this has not yet been confirmed, a multi-year budget is not possible at this point. The Executive has been clear that public finances here do need to be put on a more sustainable basis. To this end, we are committed to working with the UK Government to make sure that we are given the tools that we need. This doesn't prevent, of course, the Executive planning for the long term. We have already got to work on childcare and public sector pay, and will continue to plan for the future while we now work to create a stable financial baseline that we know we need.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Acknowledging the position around the multi-year budget that isn't going to come yet from the UK Government, are we to understand that the position of the Executive is that there will not be a multi-year budget allied to a programme for government when it is published?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member is aware, the Section 20 of the Northern Ireland Act commitment and requirement on the Executive is for that one-year costed programme. However, of course, we would want to place that within the context of a multi-year programme for government and multi-year budget. That will require some projection forward in the hope of achieving a certain level of spend. And I think to that end, the budgetary discussions with the UK Government that secured, for example, the fiscal floor, so-called, of 124, there's much more to be done in relation to that, but it does give a certain degree of certainty. And as the member is also aware, we have some of that additional funding secured as part of the £3.3 billion package. It is not without its issues, and some of that is still being worked through by the Finance Minister in terms of clarity about what is contractually committed or not. So we do have some certainty that will allow us to plan on a multi-year budget, but of course it is fiscally incredibly tight. We do need that flexibility. We want the ability to invest in transformation. But of course, ideally, we would want to weave the initial one-year budget plan into a multi-year budget to align fully with a multi-year programme for government.
Jim Allister.
Casement park costs are now out of control at $308 million with a 5% derisory GAA contribution. Is it fiscally responsible to any longer include it in a programme for government, particularly given the high level of need in health and education?
Deputy.
The member will be aware that there is a commitment to the casement project as part of the multi-sports programme. That fiscal commitment remains. There has been no change to that fiscal commitment, but of course we are aware from, and there's been a huge amount of speculation as yet to be confirmed, that costs have increased. There would of course be inflationary increase, but it does appear that costs have significantly increased. We don't, and we have not yet had confirmation about the totality of what that cost is. When we do, the Minister of Communities will be bringing forward advice in relation to this issue, but at the moment the commitment in the programme for government is to the allocation as set out in the multi-sports package that also included rugby and football at that time.
Emma Sheeran.
Deputy First Minister, will you outline the measures that will be put in place to prioritise effective delivery of the programme for government?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're very conscious that in previous programme for governments there were many things that were achieved, but of course there were commitments that were not. In the last number of weeks we've had the report out in relation to the investment strategy for Northern Ireland and capital programmes. There are some very good examples of what has been achieved there, not least the glider, the Titanic Centre, some really good examples of key capital investment on strategic interests. But of course we're also very conscious that there were big capital projects that were not advanced. So that is why the First Minister and myself have tasked the Head of the Civil Service to bring forward proposals as to an effective delivery style unit to sit at the centre, but absolutely working across the executive. This is not something that will simply be owned by the First Minister and myself in terms of asking and demanding that delivery. It will be something that is very much there to work with all of the executive ministers to make sure that we are delivering the strategic priorities of the programme for government.
Call Cheryl Brownlee.
Question 6.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 6 and 10 together. More than $36 million has been paid to victims since the Victims Payment Scheme opened for application on the 31st of August 2021. We are aware of concerns about the length of time it is taking for applications to reach determination stage. It is important to acknowledge that each application to the scheme is unique and with its own complexities, and many applications include multiple relevant incidents. Our department has provided £5 million of funding to support victims and survivors' representative groups to facilitate recruitment of welfare and support officers and admin support staff who can assist applicants with the application process. Additional funding has also been made available to provide health and wellbeing support. We are also supporting the retrieval of evidence on behalf of applicants and the Victims Payment Board. Our officials also continue to engage regularly with the Department of Justice and the Victims Payment Board to consider ways to help enhance the delivery of the scheme.
Cheryl Brownlee.
Thank you, and thank you to the Deputy First Minister. I welcome you, of course, to your role. Could you provide a timeline of the appointment of the new Victims Commissioner? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member is aware, there was a resignation of the previous Victims Commissioner. We are waiting for a submission, which should be up with us, we understand, in the next number of weeks to commence that process. We're very keen that there is a commissioner put in place as quickly as possible. It is a regulated appointment by the Public Appointments Commissioner, and therefore there are a number of requirements around that inevitably will mean that we estimate the process will probably take around 6 months. But indeed, we encourage anybody who may be listening to this, if you feel that you could do this role and do it well, to please put your name forward for it. But that process will commence, hopefully, very, very shortly, with the aim of getting a commissioner in place as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. Unfortunately, over 40 people have died while waiting on a decision on their application. What more can the Deputy First Minister do to streamline the process and also ultimately to get more eligible payments out? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Victims Payment Board have made determinations on 1,124 applications so far. 733 of those have been successful, with 391 of those applications unsuccessful. So things are moving. As indicated, £36 million has been distributed. But I know certainly, and I'm sure many members across this House are in a similar position of having constituents who are now part of the process. Their application is in and has been very, very challenging. It's very difficult process for them because, of course, inevitably the application form requires them to go through an awful lot of their experiences and the impacts of those experiences on them. So we're very conscious of that. We've asked for the Department of Finance's business consultancy service to come in and do a review. We've also been working with the Department of Justice, who appointed Capita, to look at the processes to see what we can do to improve them. We have to remember, in this process, we are not requiring people to go out and get the information and the evidence to support their application prior to application. We are encouraging people to put their application in, and then that process commences. That inevitably means that the application is considerably slower than what it would be if it was an application coming in with full supported. But we've encouraged people to do that for a number of reasons. But we are looking at how we can speed up this application process, knowing that so many victims and survivors are very concerned and waiting and need that support as quickly as possible.
And congratulations, Deputy First Minister, on your appointment. It was lovely to see you and the First Minister at a childcare setting, your first engagement. How will awareness of the scheme and any changes to the application process be raised?
So there's already been a review of the application process, and those changes and the changes to the guidance have been rolled out, and that is to really support people in terms of their application. Again, one of the key things, and certainly I've been personally speaking to victims and survivors who have found it very re-traumatising in terms of filling out their form and reliving all of those experiences they've gone through, and that is why there has been this £5 million spent on organisations and welfare officers and support officers to try to work with people as they are not only as they put the application in, but of course the implications of after that, having gone through the process of outlining that. We also know for many people the aspect of certainty is an important one, and because of the nature and the complexity of many of these applications, it's not simple to say this is going to take just 6 weeks or 12 weeks. Some of these are taking a lot longer because they are historic. Perhaps some of the records are difficult to achieve. We've been working again with PRONI around trying to secure a better way of getting access to records. We've been supporting the Department of Health, for example, with additional resources to help get medical records and whatnot. So there's a whole series of actions, but this needs to improve in terms of both communication and in terms of speed for our families. But it is a very complex and novel scheme.
Minister, I welcome the information leaflet on the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme that's gone to every household in Northern Ireland. But this is a UK-wide scheme. What are we doing to reach those people in Guildford, Hyde Park, Deal and in Birmingham?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his very important question, because this is an issue indeed that was raised in the House of Commons at the time, that this scheme potentially can go wider than that. But we made the case that there was no point of the UK government replicating this scheme. Indeed, this scheme could be fit for purpose for people no matter where they are currently residing. Many, for example, soldiers who served in Northern Ireland are back and residing in parts of Wales, of England and Scotland, and may well be able to apply for this scheme. Discussions had commenced with the UK government asking them for a financial contribution towards the overall cost. The cost of the scheme at the moment come from our block grant, and therefore, of course, to do something like a leaflet drop for the entire of the UK, that is a significant cost associated with that would be coming out of our allocation. We don't think it's unreasonable that the UK government supports that drive by making a financial contribution, not only to that, but also to the support and welfare of their applicants as well that may be coming through that. So I think those discussions will continue, and hopefully we'll have a more collaborative approach moving forward. We recognise the immense economic, historic and reconciliation potential of the site, and look forward to working with the recently appointed board to maximise that potential. We hope to meet with the board over the coming weeks. The new board will continue to consider possible approaches to regeneration of the site and provide us with advice and options for the future. The Royal Ulster Agricultural Society continue to develop their area of the site, with 3 further tranches of land transferred under the development agreement. The addition of the Logan Hall, the Fold and the Annex have further enhanced the success of Balmoral Show. The Development Corporation have carried out significant repair and restoration of the World War II era hangars, which hosts the wonderful Ulster Aviation Society collection. It continues to prove popular and attracted some 3,000 visitors over the European Heritage Open Day weekend in September of 2023. The air ambulance also operates from the site, taking the very best pre-hospital critical care to the scenes of medical emergencies.
Very quick question, Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister, for her answer. This was a question I first raised in 2016 to Minister Foster at that time. How long is the Executive Office prepared to land bank this valuable asset and stall efforts to reap the full potential benefits for Lagan Valley in particular?
Quickly, please, Deputy First Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we will be having discussions around this issue and how we can potentially unlock the site. It is a key strategic site in Lagan Valley, and of course, I want to see that potential unlocked and for it to be not just an economic driver for Lagan Valley, but indeed, I believe it can be an economic driver for the entire of Northern Ireland. So we will be working to seek a way through the issues on that site and, as I said, to unlock the potential for Lagan Valley and for Northern Ireland.
We'll move to topical questions to call Matthew O'Taylor.
Mr Speaker, Deputy First Minister, long established convention in this Assembly holds that when a motion specifically makes a call on a minister, that minister or ministers will respond to the debate. Why, in that case, on the first opposition day of this mandate, have you and the First Minister failed to respond to today's business in relation to executive veto?
Speaker, the member should be aware that your motion pertained to the work of the AERC rather than the office of the Executive Office.
I'm afraid I don't think that's a particularly acceptable answer. I will write once again to the First and Deputy First Minister about that. But can I ask, given all the vital issues you've been talking about, international relations, victims' payments, economic opportunities, why, Deputy First Minister, will you not commit to staying in your job for the rest of the mandate, given the seriousness of all the issues you've been discussing for the last half hour?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The best way to secure and stabilise the future of our government here in Northern Ireland is to build those constructive working relationships. We work within the framework as set down by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement as amended by St Andrews. That work is appropriately in terms of reform and the consideration of reform being taken forward by the AERC, and we look forward to reading their recommendations in detail.
And congratulate the Deputy First Minister in her new role. Can the Minister update as to whether the inquiry into mother and baby homes in Northern Ireland will include the burial of babies in unmarked graves throughout Northern Ireland?
This work has been moving forward apace against the report on the 5 key recommendations. It is still at a relatively early stage in terms of the key policy decisions to be made within the legislation. And I know many in terms of the people most impacted by this have not yet seen that draft legislation, but that is because that hasn't yet come up to ministers. Once that comes up to ministers, we will consider some of those policy questions in relation to the consultation, but there are still a number of issues yet to be resolved in terms of what we're going out to in consultation, but of course we want to be able to look at these issues as comprehensively as possible. The mother and baby homes were not part of the HIA inquiry, so of course we want to deal comprehensively, if at all we can, in relation to this approach and this inquiry and the redress scheme of this inquiry, as to prevent any unnecessary further inquiry to deal with some of these elements. So of course we'll be very conscious of that and trying to take that into account as fully as we possibly can.
Thank you to the Deputy First Minister for her answer there. Would the Minister agree with me that moves to resell plots of land throughout cemeteries in Northern Ireland where these babies are buried should not take place, and will she commit to working with residents who are opposed to this? Thank you.
Deputy First Minister.
Look, absolutely. I'm not aware of the detail of what you've said in terms of the potential sale of such, but there's no doubt. I think people throughout Northern Ireland, throughout the island of Ireland, have been absolutely appalled by some of the revelations that came out about the treatment of these young babies and children, and it's an incredibly emotional issue for very many. It's absolutely right that we address this in every way that we can. So look, I albeit that I don't know the detail of the specific plots of land that you're talking about, but absolutely not. There should not be land that is being sold if there is a question mark around those sites, and we will certainly take that away and consider that fully, and perhaps write to the member with more details about that.
Carl.
Minister, 30,000 people have been slaughtered in Gaza, children killed and maimed on a mass scale, people forced to eat animal feed under the hail of American-sent weaponry. Will your office, the Office of First and Deputy First Minister, commit to not meeting or engaging with the Israeli state and its representatives because of its actions?
First Minister.
Mr. Speaker. The member will be aware that I am answering questions from a departmental perspective in relation to the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister, the Executive Office. There will, of course, be party political views on that matter.
Thank you. That's a disappointing answer, Minister. Your the previous international relations strategy was supposedly committed to peace building. You cannot be committed to peace building if you're engaging with a nuclear armed state that's slaughtering people in Gaza on a mass scale. So I think you missed an opportunity to say that this House will not endorse the actions of the Israeli state, and I would call upon you and the First Minister to refuse to engage with that apartheid state.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that many people throughout Northern Ireland will want to see a resolution to the current situation in the Middle East, that they will want to see the hostages released, and they will want to see peace and movements towards peace in that region.
Clear.
Minister, an apology was issued to the victims of historical institutional abuse by the Executive. At that stage, there wasn't First Minister, Deputy First Minister in place. Will the Deputy First Minister, on behalf of herself and the First Minister, associate herself with that apology? Thank you.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and the First Minister, I would like to associate ourselves with the apology offered to victims and survivors of historic institutional abuse on the 11th of March 2022. In our role as leaders of the Executive and ministers in charge of the Executive Office, we said that we are sorry. To victims and survivors, we acknowledge the wrong that was done to you, we accept responsibility, and we offer our deepest regrets. We pledge to ensure that systemic abuse never happens again, and we commit to continuing supporting you in any way that you deserve.
Mr. McAleer.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for her response. Does the Minister acknowledge the importance that associating herself with the apology that it has for the victims?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and absolutely, and I want to pay tribute to the incredible work done by the victims and survivors. You know, in terms of the Executive Office, we've got so many people who have been fighting for so long to get recognition, to get acknowledgement and to get redress. That's not just across historical institutional abuse, it's the mother and baby homes, it's the victims and survivors of the Troubles. And we recognise absolutely the incredible journey that they have been on, the fight that they have had to take to try to get acknowledgements, justice and to get redress. And our message today absolutely is that we are here to support all of those victim survivors. We recognise the hard work that they have put in, and we want now to do everything that we can to support and help them.
Anne Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Deputy First Minister. I know that you are deeply committed to expanding childcare in Northern Ireland and delivering a strategy for Northern Ireland. On the 23rd of February, I received a response from Dr. Kiva Archibald, the Finance Minister, which indicated that the Executive had received £57.2 million of Barnett consequentials for the year 24-25, additional to the Northern Ireland budget, as a response to the expansion of childcare in the rest of the United Kingdom. Does the Minister agree with me that this would be a good opportunity to ring-fence this money for the first steps in delivering childcare, for the standardisation of preschool nursery, and perhaps
Deputy
extending Sure Start? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Upper Ban for her question, and it'll come as no surprise to say I absolutely do agree with you. There are consequentials that come from those policy decisions in Westminster. I believe absolutely that although we are not obliged to ring fence that for those particular purpose, I do think that we should ring fence that and spend that. You rightly pointed out that there are some immediate actions that can take place. Look, we're all very conscious that to get a really good, workable, effective childcare strategy, that will require working with stakeholders, that will require really thinking that through and getting the right intervention at the right time to support our settings and our families. But of course, families are under immense pressure right now, and that should mean supporting families and settings with some immediate actions while that work continues. You're right to highlight the rationalisation around the 22 hours. I think the approximate cost of that is around £35 million. So that is something both the First Minister and I have asked for urgent actions, costed actions to be brought forward on what we can do immediately while that work on the substantive strategy is put in place.
Mrs. Dodds.
I do thank the Minister for her answer, and I think it is very, very positive that we have additional funding from the UK Treasury in order to try to take first steps in relation to this. Does she also recognise that it's also important to support childcare providers in the extension of the childcare strategy?
Deputy First Minister.
Absolutely, and in my own constituency of Lagan Valley, we've already seen the impact of that pressure on settings. Look, settings, public or private, social enterprise, no matter what the type of setting, settings are under a huge amount of pressure, not least because electricity, heating costs are significantly increased. And of course our childcare workers deserve to have a fair remuneration, a fair wage, and to that end it is welcome that there is a pay increase that will shortly come in for those workers. But of course, those workers are some of the lowest paid, despite of the importance of the work that they do. But we also know that that puts the additional financial pressure on the settings. We want both objectives. We want our childcare workers to be paid well, but we want our childcare settings to be sustainable. So again, the Education Minister is urgently looking at this issue and will bring forward some proposals. But we need to stabilise current provision while we continue to look and roll out that development of the substantive childcare strategy.
Alan Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Deputy First Minister outline what discussions her department have had regarding the former Shackleton Army base in Ballykelly?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the development of these sites has been part of the Executive Office in OFM DFM for some time and will play into a discussion around the strategic approach for the sites. What we want to do is to maximise the potential, as mentioned, around the Mace-Lawn Kesh site and other strategic sites. We know that these can be very important in terms of the local area, and we want to work with the local community in terms of what can be achieved. I was reading about the development of Ebrington and the significant benefit that that has brought to the local area and the local economy. So that, I think, sets a very good example of what we can achieve if we're working with the local council and with local stakeholders in order to maximise potential of these sites.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you to the Deputy First Minister for a response today. Would you agree with me that given that this site was once described as being one of the most exciting sites in the North West, that every effort must be made to ensure that it becomes an economic driver for the North West?
Deputy First Minister.
I thank the member for your question, and indeed it would be good to meet with yourself and perhaps some local stakeholders. We're very keen, and we've said this to the committee just last week, that we're very keen to get out of Belfast, get out and about. We're both I'm a Market Hill girl, there's a Tyrone woman, so we're very keen to get out. We know that investment in the Belfast area is vitally important, and we will support that, but of course we need to bring that prosperity to all parts of Northern Ireland. So we'd be keen to get up, speak to local stakeholders about what we can do to support you in realising and maximising the potential of that site for your area.
Questions 7 and 8 have been withdrawn. I call Padraig Delargy.
Thank the Deputy First Minister for answer so far. I'm delighted to hear mention Ebrington. So just around Ebrington, I would love to hear what we can do to work together. There's a clear demand from the people of Derry for more events in Ebrington and to maximise the potential of that site. Could you maybe give me a bit more detail on what the Executive plan to do in that space?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, of course, we've worked very closely with the site, with a significant multi-million-pound investment in that site. Lots of exciting opportunities, some exciting events that have already taken place. But you're absolutely right. The overall strategic direction for Ebrington was to transfer that to the local council, and for the local council to bring forward then the events and entertainment schedule for that site. There have been some difficulties, of course, in the last number of years with this, but of course we do want that site to be an economic driver. We want that site to be able to be, albeit with working with those who have invested and are on the site, we want the site to maximise its potential. So ultimately the aim is to transfer that site to the local council, but again happy to work with local stakeholders and the council to see what we can do in the meantime to maximise the potential.
Thank the Minister for her answer. Can I ask you what you'll do to help to review the number of events that are in Ebrington and to maximise that to drive tourism, to drive the economy in the North West?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member will be aware that this is subject to contractual arrangements with those who are now currently resident on the site and have businesses on the site. I know that officials have been working very constructively. I understand that there is now going to be an entertainment programme over the course of the summer and the next financial year, and I welcome that. But I do also understand that it's a restricted programme due to those discussions. I understand that the relationships are working well, that there are constructive conversations that are happening, and I actually do think that getting the local council involved in that as the body that will eventually take ownership of this may well help in terms of the development of that local cultural and music programme for the entire community.
Brooks, quickly.
Mr. Speaker, Deputy First Minister will be aware that the Safeguarding the Union paper outlined the plans for the new East West Council. Is she able to confirm a date for that and the positive benefits she believes it will bring to Northern Ireland?
In a few seconds, DFM.
Yes, I thank you. A date was confirmed for the East West Council. I believe it's the 26th of March, and that will be taking place, as I understand it, in Belfast. But of course, the details of that will be detailed out and released very, very shortly. But we're working closely with the UK Government on this new infrastructure, which I think provides really exciting opportunities in terms of greater collaboration across and throughout the United Kingdom.
Move now to the Minister for Health, and I call Cheryl Brownlee.
22, I